Time Monk Radio. I'm Gemini, and we welcome back Susun Weed to continue our discussion of digestion in the stomach, including a wonderful medicinal herb, slippery elm. Hi, Susun. Welcome back to Time Monk Radio.
Green blessings. I'm so glad to be back with you.
Well, last week was certainly interesting. I'm anxious to hear this week's segment.
Okay. Well, we're talking about digestion start to finish here, huh?
Yes.
And, And we started out the month by smelling and tasting and understanding how important they are to the process of nourishing ourselves and to digesting our food. And then we've moved through chewing, and we've looked at carbohydrate digestion and how that starts in the mouth. And I realized that there was something else that really went along with that I didn't mention. That's actually, I think, very interesting and very important. And that is that in nature, many of the places that have carbohydrates are also places where poisons could be found. And so one of the major reasons that carbohydrate digestion starts in the mouth is to allow us to chew on something to reveal its poisons. So how would this be? Let's take an example here. Say we have a root, and this root is going to exist over winter. So it's a storage root. It's going to store carbohydrate, which has two forms, sugar and starch. And it's going to store that over the winter for the plant to make use of next year. However, here comes something under the earth looking for food. Wow, a nice, sweet, starchy root. Yum, yum, yum. Well, gosh, that doesn't work for the plant at all, does it? No. So the plant is going to produce poisons, which it stores in that root, usually in the form of alkaloids, which are quite bitter tasting. There are alkaloids in coffee caffeine, which make it taste bitter. And so when a little critter comes up and starts gnawing the root, it says, "Oh, this root tastes bitter. I don't want to eat it." And ha-ha, good for the plant. However, as human beings, if we just go for the sweet, this carbohydrate, and miss that bitter is there, we don't live long enough to leave children. So the ability to start carbohydrate digestion in the mouth has been so severely selected for that there are no human beings who don't do it. And I will often have my students, I will give them a plant and have them chew on it and see how the bitter of those poisons develops and how persistent it is. So that if we actually taste something poisonous and spit it out, the bitterness in our mouth increases because there's still bits of food in our mouth, and those carbohydrate digesting enzymes are still working it over and revealing the poisons underneath. So only those who are able to do this manage to have us as their great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren. And I find that quite fascinating. There are certainly animals that can't do that. So we have this rather unique ability. And we talked about swallowing, and again, moving those little particles, those atoms and molecules of food down to the liver. We will be getting to the liver the beginning of next month in October. We will be starting with looking at what's been going on with liver. I keep mentioning it, but it's taking us a while to get there. And then, of course, we talked about drinking and the difference between hot liquids and cold liquids. And just to summarize, hot liquids stay in the stomach for long periods of time and help us to eat less because we feel fuller. And cold liquids hydrate us. They move out of the stomach very, very rapidly and move into the blood. So we don't have to worry about whether or not we drink with our food. It's fine to take in nutritive drinks, and we don't have to worry if those are hot drinks or cold drinks. It just depends on what we want. And as we move from the esophagus down toward the stomach, then we start to need to think about bitters and the role of those herbal bitters and aperitifs, and to make an ally there among the bitters. I visit a garden, and he grows a lot of greens, and it's interesting to me. It's a common cut-your-own garden, and the prices are posted. You leave your payment in the tin on the way out. And he grows, great long rows of different kinds of greens for your salads. And, the lettuces, you can see people have been harvesting the romaine and the oak leaf lettuce and the beautiful crinkled red leaf lettuce. There's a whole row of crinkly chicory, which is as bitter as the day is long, and none of it has been cut. We don't like our bitter greens very much. Garlic mustard is a weed that's a bitter green, and I often suggest that for people because it's a kind of mustardy, nice, bitter green to start working with. In fact, for many people, just including more cooked greens in their diet, because all greens have some bitter qualities, even if they don't taste bitter, is often enough to really vastly improve digestion and the results of digestion by including cooked greens as a regular part of the meal. But if you don't want to, or if that's not good enough for you, remember that herbal tinctures of a wide variety of plants, dandelion, chicory, burdock, yellow dock, any of the artemisias, including cronewort, which some people call mugwort, or wormwood, gentians, golden seal, berberis, Oregon grape. The list just goes on and on and on of bitters. I have a wonderful image of being in Jamaica and being with a root woman in Jamaica. And we went out in the forest, and she would stop and dig up a root. And it was unusual for me because she doesn't really have a winter like I do. And I'm so used to only digging roots when there's no top growth. And it seemed almost wrong to me, that she didn't have to mark where the roots were and go back and find them when there's a little snow on the ground. And she'd say, "Oh yeah, that one," and she'd just dig it up. And when we went back to where she was preparing her herbal tonics, she tossed some of them in one barrel and some of them in another barrel. And I said, "What's the difference?" Oh, she said, "That's woman's tonic." She said, "And over here, this is male tonic, and you have to put a lot of bitter roots in male tonic because it's not really bitter. The men don't think it's going to make them strong, wink, wink." So I thought that was quite interesting that, her culture associated bitter with sexual prowess. And, of course, that bitter in the digestive system is going to give us digestive prowess. It's not such a different kind of thought. That a little bit of bitter stress to the taste buds will really improve how we digest our food. Now, I mentioned before, when we were talking about taste way at the beginning of this month, that the tongue really is not the queen of taste, that there are many taste buds throughout the digestive system, not in the stomach, but in the small intestine. And I also mentioned that we have only one kind of receptor for sweet, and so it's easy to fool the sweet receptor. What I didn't mention was that we have almost 24 different receptors for bitter. We are able to make such a close differentiation between the, okay, that's good for me bitter of dandelion, to the, that is poisonous to me bitter of celandine. There certainly are bitter things that humans eat, like coffee, which we've mentioned several times, is a bitter taste and a bitter plant, and yet there is something there. It's not as attractive as sweet, and yet it's something that we do like. And often what do people put in their coffee is milk, which is sweet, and sugar, which is sweet, to make it more palatable to them. So allying with those digestive bitters and having some slippery elm at hand. I told you that slippery elm was considered a food by the people of the Adirondacks, and that's because it actually contains some protein as well as some sweet and some minerals. And protein is what is really being focused on in the stomach. Now, we all know that proteins are made up of amino acids. And I'd like you to pretend with me that these amino acids are those curly phone cords that telephones used to have before the telephone went in your pocket. So remember those curly phone cords. And here's a drawer, and there's a whole bunch of different colored curly phone cords in the drawer. A blue one and a red one and a yellow one and a black one and a white one and a tan one and all different colors of cords. And oh my goodness, they are all mixed up together. We cannot have this. We need to take all of these cords and we need to untangle them. This, in fact, is what the stomach is doing to protein. We can envision the amino acids to be like those phone cords. And when they come in our food, they are all tangled together. The acids and the enzymes produced by the stomach help to cleave those proteins into their individual amino acids. Now, I bet you're wondering if taking pills of enzymes would help. Well, yes, they would in this instance. There are, in fact, in plants and available in pills, enzymes that really do this protein splitting up fantastically. Think about eating raw pineapple. Remember what I told you about getting that stomach acid under my fingers and I begin to bleed out from under my fingernail bed? Well, think about eating raw pineapple. The same thing is happening, isn't it? The raw pineapple starts digesting your mouth. And it makes your mouth sore or tender or tingly. And if you eat enough of it, the part where your two lips comes together cracks and starts to bleed. Pineapple contains a powerful enzyme called bromelain. And bromelain is a protein-digesting enzyme. I often tease that that's why we have pineapple with ham. It makes the ham more digestible. And you can buy bromelain if you don't want to eat pineapple as a way to improve the digestibility of the proteins that you're eating. Papaya also contains a protein-splitting enzyme, and that's called papain. And we notice that enzymes end with ain. Papain is sold in supermarkets as meat tenderizer. It starts unjumbling the proteins that are all mixed together, unjumbling the amino acids, and neatening up our drawer for us. And certainly the same thing if you get a papaya and you think, oh, I am going to lick out this papaya skin, your lips will tell you that there's a lot of this enzyme in the papaya skin as they begin to tingle and burn, and you run for something to get this enzyme off your lips. The third fruit that contains protein-digesting enzyme is kiwi fruit. And the name of the enzyme in kiwi is a very long string of letters, which I have simply gone on strike against learning. Do forgive me. I'm sure that in 2 seconds flat, you can find out the name of this enzyme on the internet. It's in kiwi fruit, that fuzzy fruit that's green inside. I met a man who told me this story. He said, every year my pals and I, we get an elk. And that elk, it's got some pretty tough muscles. And we buy that meat tenderizer stuff, and that starts the loosening up process, but it doesn't really do it that well. And I heard that you could use kiwi fruit. So I took a really tough piece of elk, and I put it in a container, and I sliced up, 3-4 kiwi fruits just all over that thing, and put a tight lid on it and stuck it in the refrigerator. And I forgot about it for 2 days, and I took it out, and I had a bunch of slices of kiwi fruit floating around with a bone and meat soup. That stuff sure does work. I don't know of anybody who is selling the enzyme in kiwi fruits, but they are available, and they can help us with our digestion of protein in the stomach. The stomach is variable in its size, but fairly the same in its shape. And if you think about the pipes under your sink, if you can see them, that's somewhat similar to the shape of the stomach. There's a tube coming down from the drain, which is the esophagus, and then there's kind of a bend there, which is called the trap, right?
Yes.
And then it kind of goes up from there. And this, again, helps the stomach to not splash up there. And there are various different areas in the stomach that are doing different things. We're not really sure what it is that causes the Helicobacter pylori to actually cause ulcers. At first, we denied that any bacteria could cause ulcers in the stomach, and the white man who was working with this in desperation drank quite a bit of the bacteria and came down with horrible stomach ulcers. And at that point, science said, maybe indeed you're onto something there. And then for some years we said, this is causative. And as we looked into more and more people's stomachs and treated more and more people, we began slowly to realize, I see, everybody has this bacteria in their stomach. And we're not quite sure what triggers it to actually cause ulcers. We certainly know that there are families who are more sensitive genetically to the effects of having this bacteria in their stomach and in their small intestine. But again, we can't say, if you have this, then you are going to get those ulcers, because there seem to be a lot of other things going on. And it's going to come to as no surprise at all to you that I suggest that eating well and drinking your nourishing herbal infusions is one of the difference between having this bacteria in your stomach and having this bacteria start to eat your stomach and ulcerate the inner lining of your stomach. Again, slippery elm to the rescue. Slippery elm will help to heal the ulcerations and to counter the pain. And remember, last week we talked about that old Russian remedy for getting rid of this bacteria. Of course, there are now modern medical treatments, drugs, which get rid of this bacteria, but unfortunately, while doing it, they tend to get rid of a lot of other gut flora as well. And next month, in October, we are going to be meeting our gut flora, and we are going to be finding that gut flora are some of the most critical and most important aspects, not just of our digestive health, but of overall health. So we might want to hesitate before we do things that will kill off any of those flora, which we are yet to meet. The, shall we call it, expandable nature of the stomach allows us to eat varying quantities of food. Certain human beings live in situations where food is at best erratic. Say the desert southwest of North America, where food, when it comes, is profuse. And in order to survive, one must be able to eat a very large amount of food in a rather small time, and then to simply pack that on as adipose tissue, and then to be able to slowly burn that fatty tissue through the lean times when there is no food available at all. So this is an adaptation that we have, but when food then becomes available all the time, this adaptation doesn't serve us very well, because it means that we can overeat and gain weight, but we never meet the famine time. That's what, this is a survival dodge. But when we don't meet the famine time, then our survival dodge winds up killing us. The tissues of the body become more and more resistant to insulin. We wind up with adult onset diabetes. The liver struggles more and more. We wind up with non-alcoholic cirrhosis or damage to the liver. Very strange things start to happen to our bodies when we eat a lot, which, as I said, is a survival thing, but then don't have that famine in between. And I'm not suggesting that this is necessarily the way to eat or the healthiest way to eat. I'm simply suggesting that it is one way that humans have learned to survive in what we might call more marginal environments. And we begin to see this expressed in a population which has great access to food, but little access to famine. And so they put on the weight, and they put on the weight, and they put on the weight. And one thing that these people are now being encouraged to do, if you are technically obese, if you technically weigh more than a certain amount, then some kind of surgery to the stomach, whether it's banding the stomach to make the stomach smaller or actually bypassing the stomach in some way, certainly allows these people to eat less, a lot less, because you simply don't have any room to put it. I was watching a DVD about the digestive system, and the instructor said one of the most gross things I have ever heard, and I ask you to forgive me for repeating this, but it creates such an image that I don't think we will ever forget it. He says, if you could see the stomach of someone after a Thanksgiving dinner, and I don't mean from the outside, I mean the actual organ, the stomach, he said, you would wonder how there was room for any other organ in that person's body. This instructor said the stomach grows and swells to such an extent that it literally pushes other things around. So this is how you may have wondered, how can they do these hot dog eating contests? How can they do a pie eating contest? How can these people eat 20 pies or 50 hot? That's how. The stomach is a magic expandable bag, and we can put it down there, and the stomach will keep on expanding. And remember, we started with taste. we have a different I'm full for each taste. That's how you can eat this big, rich meal in a restaurant and say, oh my goodness, I'm so full, I can't eat another bite. And then they present you with the dessert menu and you say, oh, but I'm hungry for sweet. Each one of the flavors has its own satiation. The fact that you just ate 3,000 calories doesn't mean anything to the part of you that wants sweet. It's happy for another 2,000 calories right there at one meal, and there's no way we're going to be able to walk that off. Wow. Lots of interesting things going on in the digestive system, and especially here in the stomach. The proteins are taken apart. Carbohydrates are also dealt with. And we're left with a lot of other things in our food. And so the action of the stomach takes this and turns it, as we said, into a kind of liquid called chyme. And that goes out through a gated aperture at the far side of the stomach and into the very beginning part of the small intestine, the duodenum. And as we said, this is a place where there can be ulcers. And this is a very exciting venue. In a way, this is Times Square of the digestive system. Because right at this place, it's not just contents of the stomach moving into the small intestine, but everybody else gets their say in here. There is a little tube coming from the spleen, and the spleen gets to put things into the mix. And the gallbladder, it has a little tube that's coming from it, and it gets to put things into the mix. Remember, those enzymes that the liver was making get put into the mix here too. So as we come into this area, into this solar plexus area, we have a lot of things happening. Ideally, at this point, about 4 hours has passed from the time when we first smelled that food, tasted it, chewed it up, brought it through the esophagus into the stomach, where it has been dealt with by enzymes and acids, and now we're finally ready to move out of the stomach. But before we leave the stomach, I do want to let you know that any enzymes besides the ones made by the stomach and the three that I told you about, the ones from pineapple, papaya, and kiwi fruit, any other enzyme taken in pill form or even in food form, because the food we're eating, of course, has enzymes in it, all those enzymes are destroyed by stomach acid. You know, we talked about the raw versus cooked debate, and I wanted to really understand enzymes, and toward that end I read some books and watched some videos about enzymes and learned that basically I am a bag of enzymes, but I couldn't find anything in these scientific books and courses of study that helped me to understand how enzymes that were taken could be usable in the body. And so I hired a researcher, and I agreed to pay her for 4 hours of research, internet research, on this issue of enzymes and food digestion. And after 4 hours, what she found was nothing. There was no scientific study of any kind that showed that enzymes had any effect on human digestion. Out of curiosity, her own curiosity, she gave me a 5th hour for free, which found that all acids, including the 3 I mentioned, that do protein digestion, are completely destroyed by the stomach. And that when the digested liquefied food leaves the stomach, there are no enzymes in it. And when I thought about that, I thought, well, of course, if I'm a bag of enzymes, the last thing I would want or be able to tolerate is other enzymes, because my enzymes are just going to fight with them. What an interesting idea. So I often say to people, save your money. Right? If you want enzymes that are going to help you digest meat and other proteins, then certainly the fruit-based ones will do fine. But interestingly enough, what I find is that many people who are approaching me are vegetarians. And so they are not getting the kinds of proteins that these protein cleaving fruits actually work best on. And I think that it's other things going on in their diet that lead them to want to take digestive enzymes, or perhaps more to the point, to eat raw food so they get enzymes that can be used in digestion. Again, there are no enzymes found in any food that make it past the stomach, and so only enzymes in 3 fruits, which actually can break proteins apart, are active and effective in human digestion, and at that, only in the stomach. They don't get past the many, shall we call them, watchful eyes there as the contents of the stomach starts coming into the small intestine. Well, my goodness, that's it for September. We'll be back in October, moving ourselves through the digestive system from start to finish.
Thank you, Susan. It was a great segment tonight. I appreciate it.
Green blessings. Good night.
Good night. Thank you, Susan. Next week, we have some VIPs joining us in the discussion of digestion. We'll welcome the liver, gallbladder, and the pancreas. Some liver-loving herbs will also be making an appearance, so be sure to join us for this very informative topic. On behalf of Time Monk Radio, be well.